I'm going to start this evening with our land acknowledgement. On March 14th, 2022, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we may meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contributions in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all of our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strengths of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. With that, I'll proceed to roll call. I believe all of council and the mayor is in attendance. CIO Morris, would you like to do a roll call for staff, please?
Yes, for sure. So we have a large contingent of talent with us tonight. We have Director McMunn, Director Manhire, Director Costello, our Treasurer Janet Coziel, Julia Crowder, our Manager of Economic Development and Tourism, and our Senior Planner Carl Grenke, and of course Nadine Bennett, our Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, CAO Morris. I'll call for amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, I'll call for disclosure of monetary interest. I see none, but I'll remind council that should you determine that you need to disclose a monetary interest in an item later on the agenda, please simply raise your hand when the item comes up for discussion. We have no delegations tonight, nor do we have adoption of minutes, but I do understand that we have several directors' reports. So CAO Morris, if you'd like to proceed with directors' reports, please.
Certainly. So we'll start off with Nadine Bennett, and she's going to give an update on last week's emergency control group meeting on behalf of, as our Deputy CEMC.
Good evening. I'll try to make this brief. I know there was quite a bit on the agenda last week. So just to note that our control group had their 77th meeting on Thursday, March 10th, 2022. And we discussed a milestone moment that on March 11th marked 2 years of the World Health Organization's declaration of the pandemic. So again, 77th meeting. We had our regular control group in attendance, as well as Dr. Stewart and Kim McCann from the Lanark, Leeds and Grenville Health Unit. And so we discussed that there's 142 Ontario municipalities that still have a state of emergency. Dr. Kieran Moore, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, issued a news release on March 9th, and that was discussed, that outlined further provincial reopening measures. So just to highlight, on March 14th, the mandatory vaccination policy for employees in long-term care homes is lifted. There was also a directive requiring that unvaccinated workers in hospitals and other high-risk healthcare settings partake in a regular rapid test program. That's been lifted. Letters of instruction to the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, and the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility are revoked. And that will mean that those sectors will no longer be required to have vaccination policies that at a minimum require unvaccinated workers to partake in educational courses on the benefits of vaccination. On March 21st, masking requirements will be removed in most settings, and there are some exceptions that can be noted on the provincial website. Remaining measures in schools, including cohorting and on-site symptom screening, are being removed. Remaining regulatory requirements for businesses are being removed, including passive screening and the need to have a COVID-19 safety plan. On March 28th, the Reopening Ontario Act expires, but the remaining orders associated with the act are extended for 30 days. On April 27th, masking requirements are removed in all remaining settings. All remaining orders under the Reopening Ontario Act expire. So the group did discuss that they determined that the requirement for masking on the part of patrons in the municipal facilities, so those patrons that are attending our facilities, will align with the provincial health measures announced for March 21st. As of this date, the public will no longer be mandated to wear masks, but are strongly encouraged to do so and be respectful of those who make a personal choice to continue to mask or not. There will be no change to our town workplace safety plan and vaccination policy at this time. Employees are still required to wear masks within the town facilities and when interacting with the public or other members of staff. And the last thing will be that a report will be presented at Committee of the Whole on a potential return to in-person council or committee meetings on Monday, March 28th. So I think that's just a brief update. And if anyone has any questions, I can do my best to answer on behalf of the chief.
Thank you, Nadine. That's a lot of information. I see Councillor McKenna has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nadine and the committee again for their work. Was the discussion of lifting the emergency declaration for the town of Smith Falls, was that discussed at the meeting?
Yes, we're going to discuss that further at our next meeting of the control group. So we should have some more information then.
Thank you. Could you, or some either the mayor or yourself or CEO Morris, just talk about at this point the benefit of continuing to have this state of emergency in place over the next however long? What are the ongoing benefits now that we've reached this point of continuing it, I guess?
I don't know if Malcolm or the mayor might want to answer that. I can as well if they rather.
CEO Morris, why don't you try and answer?
Thank you. So through the chair, at this point, there isn't a large advantage, certainly from the point of view of funding or any other provincial incentives. One thing we need to be mindful of is when the state of emergency ceases, then we have to consider the ability to meet virtually. So we want to align your direction, your council's direction, that is, on meeting formats with the end of the emergency. So we don't put ourselves in a position where we've ceased the declaration of emergency and then we can't meet virtually. So there's a timing issue that we're working on right now. So on the 28th, you'll be able to have that discussion and provide direction to staff. And then at that point, the mayor would have more flexibility to deal with the state of emergency.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO Morris. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, we look forward to receiving the follow-up report at the end of the month. Thanks, Nadine.
Thank you.
CEO Morris, who's next?
Up next, we have Ms. Crowder.
Good evening. I have three brief updates for council tonight. The first, I wanted to let council know that we have filled the position for Community and Economic Development Coordinator. So I'm excited to announce that Carrie Barlow was the successful candidate, and Carrie started with us today. Carrie brings a lot of skills and experience from a wide variety of sectors that will complement this position. So if you have a chance to come to town hall in the near future, definitely stop by and say hello to her. We're really excited to have her on board. The second update is with regards to things that are happening at the Heritage Museum. The Heritage House Museum is doing a March Break Children's Camp this Thursday, March 17th. It's for ages 6 to 12 in celebration of St. Patrick's Day. You can get kits for $25 and pre-registration is required. And anyone who's interested can contact the museum by phone, by contacting them through Facebook or emailing them at the Heritage House Museum. They're also looking at planning an upcoming exhibit featuring notable women of Smith Falls. The museum is requesting that the public nominate women to be celebrated in this exhibit during International Women's Month. Nominees should be from women of Smith Falls, past or present, who have had an influence locally, nationally, or internationally throughout any time period. Impacts can be cultural, economic, athletic, political, academic, environmental, or a combination of these. Once the nominees have been collected, the museum committee will review the submissions, and nominations will be submitted through the museum Facebook page or forms that can be picked up by appointment at the museum. Nominations will be accepted until the end of March, so March 31st, and the exhibit will open May 7th. The last update that I have is with regards to the water treatment plant redevelopment, RFP. Staff launched a marketing blitz over the last 2 weeks. The RFP is released today or will be released today. And through that marketing blitz, we were able to obtain 20 pre-registrations. So that's really exciting. So the marketing campaign that we did do was fairly wide, and we have at least 20 people who's interested in receiving that RFP package, and we'll be sending those off later on tonight to those registrations. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Julia. Any questions or comments from council? Nope, seeing none, we'll move on to the next update. Sierra Morris.
Next up, we have Mr. Manhire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have 2 quick updates today. One is that the town hall renovations will be starting this week. We have moved staff out of the area, as well as any materials that need to be removed. And site meetings were held with the general contractor and subs today. They will be starting demolition next week, which will start with the remediation of identified substances in the building. And we'll continue from there. They will be using just that area, and it will be isolated from the rest of town hall for the duration of the project. We will be providing updates, and we're working on we've identified 3 different cost-saving areas that we're trying to quantify right now. And once we do that, we'll bring that back to the council just to let you know progress on it. The second thing is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We've done all of our consultation and reviews. We've modified the document, and it is ready to come forward to council for March 28th. We'll be forwarding a copy to council members by tomorrow, so that you can have some time to review it and ask any questions before the council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manhire. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I have one. Mr. Manhire, are there any activities for March break that you want to highlight from Rec and Culture? I know Julia gave a great summary of things that are going on at the museum, but are there public skates, any sort of activities that you wanted to highlight?
Madam Chair, there are still public skates that will be happening throughout the March break. We will also have, there's a number of camps, and those camps can be found on our website. They are privately run camps that are running out of the facilities. So I don't have an exhaustive list of them at this point, but they are on the website.
Thank you. And I assume information about public skate can also be found on social media on the website?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sierra Morris?
Yes, our 4th and final update is with Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a minute to update council on some exciting times. We know spring's in the air when construction is getting ready to ramp up and commence. So some of you will have perhaps maybe seen Kavanaugh on site over the last week or so on Beckwith Street between Russell and Elmslie Street North. So right now they haven't mobilized yet, but they've been doing some shallow test pits just to inform what the soil conditions are like within the parking lanes adjacent to the 2 traveled lanes. So that work's taking place kind of as we speak, and they have sent out notices to property owners within the vicinity of Beckwith Street for their sub-consultant to go around those properties to do their building condition assessments, i.e. primarily they want to check on foundation condition inside and outside of the buildings to make sure that any claims that come through as a result of construction can be handled properly, so they know what the condition of buildings are before construction commences, as opposed to trying to deal with it after the fact. Yeah, so mobilization we'll see starting to happen in and around the 11th of April, with hopefully shovels in the ground by the 18th of April. And that's only about a month away. So exciting times. Working with the DBA right now to have a a meeting with the business owners through the downtown business area here in the next couple of weeks. We will have representatives from Morrison Hirschfield as well as Kavanaugh Construction at that meeting. And there'll be more to come once we get that scheduled. We'll certainly share that with council should they wish to participate in that meeting. We're looking at right now having it hosted at the visitor center here for anybody that wishes to attend. And we'll have some drawings of the project up for people to look at. We're also in the midst of updating our Speak Up Smiths Falls page with all pertinent information for the project to date, and we will be putting updates through that platform as construction progresses on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to inform people as to progress of the project. So excited to get this project underway, as I'm sure council is as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMunn. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, Mr. McMunn, I will warn you, you have very large shoes to fill on the communications portfolio for this project. There was very, very robust public engagement in phase one of this. Don't let that scare you. We're sure that this one will be just as engaging, and we look forward to having the first open house at the Visitors Center. So thank you for that. CAO Morris, there are no other updates, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll move on to correspondence items. We have two items on the agenda, and they are very correlated. They pertain to follow up to a resolution that was previously circulated by the town of Aurora early in 2022 regarding a request to the province of Ontario to dissolve the Ontario Land Tribunal. I understand that Mr. Grenke is on the line and would like to speak to these items at a high level, and then council can decide whether or not we're going to forward this to committee of the whole for further action.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. As indicated, a number of municipalities have looked at a resolution to support the dissolution of the Ontario Lands Tribunal, which is, of course, the primary appeal body that exists for planning decisions as well as other things. And it seems to have received some traction, especially in southwestern Ontario. And in this case, the concern has been raised that the Ontario Land Tribunal, as it is seen to occasionally overrule local planning decisions for a variety of reasons. And I think this has also been outlined and highlighted as a concern through some of the provincial housing initiatives that they're looking at, where this is perceived as red tape. In Smith Falls, I think we're fortunate in that this has not really been a significant issue. We don't have a significant experience of planning appeals or other such actions that have really slowed down or otherwise impeded municipal decision making. I think in some ways we've been very fortunate. I think I would, in my perspective, I would be very careful or potentially wary about supporting this. I think the principles of procedural fairness necessitate an impartial appeal body to consider planning decisions. So I think there's always room for reforms or other actions to speed the process up. I know that the appeals process in the province does evolve on a fairly regular basis, and certainly with my time with the town of Smith Falls, I've seen a few changes to how appeals are done. However, in the absence of a solution or something to replace the Ontario Land Tribunal, it may be premature to support the dissolution. And certainly if council would like staff to undertake some more research or prepare a more robust opinion on this, I'd be happy to do so. But my fairly high level assessment will certainly look for council's direction on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor Brennan, do you want to start? But then perhaps I'll just ask whether or not there's any appetite by committee to ask Carl to come back with a staff report on this item at a later date. Go ahead, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I not being a planner and not really knowing the ins and outs, but I tend to agree with Senior Planner Grenke, and but I'd be happy, or I welcome a more detailed report. Perhaps rather than saying, well, get rid of this body, do something to reform it. I don't know how, but I'm not sure that just saying get rid of it is the right thing to do. So I'd be happy to listen to more and have it come back to a county meeting.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I'll just ask for a show of hands of councillors who are interested in having this come back. 3, 4, 5. All right, excellent. Carl, perhaps you can place this on the agenda at our next meeting of committee, or at a time that you see suitable.
Yes,
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor McKenna, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, it's just to give a little bit more nuance to that direction, so that I'm not going to ask him again when he comes back. What I'm wondering, if the motion that we're reading is accurate, it says that no other province has such a body. In the report, when you come back, Carl, could you please just give us an idea of what other provinces do instead of this? So that's all. If you have a sense of that, not every province, but maybe one example or two, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just like to note, I think the planning department's very busy right now, and I don't see this as an issue that this council would be championing. So I wouldn't support getting staff to invest any more time in it. I don't think it's prudent to get rid of this at this stage, and we're about to go into a provincial election. So I don't know how much these motions are really relevant to our community or worth it for our staff to be investing time into it. So I just wanted to put that objection out there.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. Perhaps it's also pertinent to note that this would be the 4th set of reforms to the Ontario Land Tribunal in the last 5 years, for some context. So, Carl, whenever you have the time to come back to us with a report, I don't want to give you a deadline on that, but do what you can. All right, moving on. In-camera items. We do have one in-camera item tonight, and I'll ask for the public's patience as we recess into in-camera, and we'll be back shortly. Tonight's in-camera item, the recommended motion reads that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smiths Falls, as provided in Section 239, Sub 2, Sub B of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, move into a closed meeting to address a personal issue about an identifiable individual respecting a committee or board appointment. We will be back soon. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Brennan, and seconded by Councillor Alfred. All in favor? Oh my gosh, 6 months away and I'm rusty. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just be a second here, Madam Chair. I'm just going to have our live party remove that in-camera screen and we'll count back in. There we go. All right. Okay, Madam Chair. So if you're ready, we can go live in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome back. I believe actually we're short 2 councillors. I don't see Councillor Brennan and I don't see Councillor Alfred.
I will get them to rejoin. They may just have been bumped out.
Okay. In the sake of efficiency, because we do have quite a long agenda tonight, I'll give the rise and report coming out of the in-camera session. We are going to add a priority item to tonight's agenda, item 8.11, regarding a committee appointment. So stay tuned to hear more about that at the end of our meeting. I do see Councillor Alfred and Councillor Brennan have now joined us. So with that, we will proceed to priority items. Item 8.1 is the development charges background study and bylaw report. We do have a recommended motion from staff, and Janet is here to speak to it. Janet, is there any new information aside from what's in the report or anything you would like to highlight before council debates the item?
Madam Chair, so the one change that was changed on this particular version is the effective date for the implementation. It was originally May 1st. We changed that to, with council's direction, to June 1st. So if council concurs, this will be brought forward to the next meeting of council for approval. Now, I wanted to make one clarification on the draft bylaw before you. It has an approval date of March 28th. That actually should read March 21st, which is your next meeting of council. So this will obviously be revised before that's finalized. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Janet. I love how efficient you are tonight. Council, do you have any questions or comments for Janet before we provide direction? I see none. We have debated, for public context, we have debated this very thoroughly in the last couple of meetings. So if you are looking for a discussion and debate on the matter, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at some of the video coverage from our earlier debates. This is really just kind of that final housekeeping amendment. So as Janet said, we will forward this to council to our next meeting, being March 21st. Thanks, Janet. Next item, I believe, Janet, you're on the agenda for this one, but the report's by Nadine. This is our statement of remuneration and expense report for council from last year. Any new information or a summary?
No, as the section 285 or 4 of the Municipal Act, it just states the treasurer shall bring it forward before the end of March. So that's just here this evening to provide that summary.
Thank you, Janet. Queen of efficiency. Any questions or comments? This is a pretty nominal housekeeping item, although Janet was, or Nadine, whoever wrote the part, was keen to point out that our expenses are far lower than they have been in previous years, mostly due to COVID. So congratulations, council. No comments or questions? All right, we will receive the item for information purposes. The next item is with Mr. McMunn regarding local improvement charge bylaws for Maple Ridge Subdivision, Wood Avenue Phase 2. There is a recommendation from staff that we proceed to pass the bylaw respecting the LIC for lots on the Wood Avenue extension into the Maple Ridge Subdivision. Mr. McMunn, is there anything new or a summary you would like to proceed?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick summary. So at council's direction from the October 4th, 2021 meeting, we did get direction from council to issue the notice of intent to pass a bylaw. And subsequently on November 30th, 2021, we did send that notice of intent out to the 2 property owners of 7 lots on Wood Avenue. so they had the information and they knew what council's direction was with respect to passing the local improvement charge. Coincidentally, they had a month to respond in the form of a petition. If they were a majority of the owners who represented a minimum of 1/2 of the addressed value, or sorry, the assessed value of the lots affected by the local improvement charge. As it turns out, we didn't have a petition to that effect. So now council can consider passing of the bylaw to impose the local improvement charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Any comments or questions from council? We'll start with, I've got a thumbs up from Sean, but we'll start with questions from Councillor McKenna, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may have partially answered it, Director McMahon. Just I was wondering about the feedback. Was anyone else or any other group entitled to respond, or just the property owners that were affected by this? Could anyone else at that particular point comment or question what decision we made? And if so, did you hear anything else? It sounds like we hadn't at all.
Yeah, no, through the chair, if I could, to address the question, no, it would be just property owners within the serviceable scope of the affected area. So in this particular case, there was 2 owners that represented 7 lots of the 18, and the other 18 were owned by the developer, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alfred, I believe you had a question as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Mr. McMahon has just answered it, but my question was, there are 7 lots of 2 owners, but that results in 18 building lots.
7 lots. So 2 owners, 1 owner owns 6 lots and the other owner owns 1.
Right.
And then there's
but
11.
In the first paragraph, you say the property owners of 18 building lots fronting phase 2.
Perhaps I can clarify for Mr. McMahon, but I believe that the developer who is putting in the servicing owns those 18 lots, with the additional 6 and 1 being privately held. Mr. McMahon?
Yeah, through the chair. So for clarification, the developer owns 11 of the 18 lots, and then the balance of the 7 are owned by 2 other property owners.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Seeing no other questions or comments from council, Mr. McMahon, I believe you've got consensus from council to advance this to council at the next meeting on March 21st to pass that bylaw. Thank you. Now don't go anywhere, because you are still here to ask for us to execute an agreement regarding provincial funding for the improved monitoring and public reporting of sewage overflows and bypass program. Is there anything new or a summary you would like to provide on this item?
No, just through the chair. So just a quick, not an update, because this is the first as council's hearing of this. But it's interesting to note that we did not apply for a grant. This is funding that's coming down from the province through the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks in response to 20 identified municipalities in Ontario that have high level of sewage or combined sewage overflows to receiving water bodies, and Smith Falls being one of them. They're called a CSO is what that acronym stands for. So we do know that we're receiving about $175,000 and change for this program. There are some criteria that we have to meet in terms of the eligibility to, so different programs that we can put in place for the municipality to address our combined sewer overflows in terms of monitoring and how we report that to our community. So we've developed a really, really good program for that. It's been adopted and endorsed by the province in that. So we have our combined sewage overflow on Old Mill Road. So that's at the bottom of that system. And just for reference for the committee members and anybody listening from the community, I think it's important to note that we do have an abundance of combined sewers north of the Rideau River. So everything north up through the DVA and as we head north out through town. And any times that we do get it into inclement weather events, primarily high rain events, we do know that our system at times under those heavy rain events do surcharge. And that's when we would be in a position where we're in a bypass or overflow scenario to the Rideau River. So the province is really pushing for monitoring and communication to the public. So our monitoring is going to be part and parcel to upgrading those two stations at Old Mill Road and then the pumping station over at the Via Rail station on Highway 15 with connection to our SCADA system, which is our monitoring system at the wastewater treatment plant. Right now, we don't have that monitoring capability. So this is something that's fully supported by the ministry, exactly what they're looking for through this program. And second to that would be the reporting. So we're looking at different ways that we can almost immediately following a CSO event where we can post information to our website and our different social media platforms so that information is almost live, if you will, as it's happening. It can be pushed out to the community so they're aware. Another component that we're looking at doing is some signage at those two locations just to advise what the potential is there for a bypass event to happen and why it happens, with perhaps a QR code that people can use their phones to scan to get a little more information, links to our website where the information is housed, and to really push information out to the community. And that's really what the ministry is looking for in this under this program. So good news story. It's another $175,000 coming towards the town for upgrades.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Are there any questions or comments from council? We'll start with Councillor McGuire, and then Mayor Pankow. I acknowledge your question.
Thanks, Director McMahon. I fully support the recommendation, and I applaud the ministry for being proactive with this funding, where it's coming straight to the municipality without an application. I think we know with Becker Street how hard it can be sometimes to communicate the importance of the underground infrastructure aspect of a project. And I think by better communicating this to the public, it's really going to make a difference to show how important it is to get these sewers separated. And the George Street project's coming down the pipes, so the timing couldn't be better. And these numbers are like, I had no idea that we were having in the ballpark of close to 10, sometimes even 15 events a year. So hopefully we can keep improving our infrastructure and get grants for that as well. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Chris. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Director McMahon. I also support the recommendation, and I assume the lack of, I guess, clarity and volume range and duration range at the events we've had at Old Mill speak exactly to the need to have the monitoring in place so we know exactly what has happened. I assume, is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, exactly. Through the chair. Yeah, so in those inclement weather events, we do know that there's a potential there for bypasses to happen, and most times, I wouldn't say all the time, like we have indicators at our wastewater plant just from volumes that are coming in for treatment that causes for operators to be dispatched to go out to those different stations to find out just what's happening and if there is actually a bypass or the potential of an overflow to happen. So a bypass is basically bypass of collection to discharge water into our receiving water course, which in our case is the Rideau River, versus an overflow, which is basically just that. It's an overflow of the station where it surcharges and flows over land. So yeah, so right now it's not that we're going into it blind, but being connected to our SCADA system with different mechanics inside those stations, i.e. floats and whatnot that tie into our communications. Basically, in a nutshell, we can monitor it with an operator right at the wastewater treatment plant, and they can see in their SCADA system that event's happening, and then we can respond accordingly. Not that we're going to change anything, but at least we can monitor and we can record when it's starting to happen, the date that it's happening, how long it's happened, the theoretical volume of the bypass event, to inform the public. And that's basically what they know it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, but it's pushing that information into the community when it happens.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? No? Okay. I have a couple. Mr. McMahon, I won't lie to you. I was absolutely flabbergasted that this is something that happens as frequently as it does in town. And given our changing climate, it's something that I can only foresee happening more and more. Unfortunately, it doesn't sound like the provision of this funding to us was a gold star of approval for our infrastructure, but rather a requirement for us to update so that we are not one of 20 municipalities in the province that are overflowing our sewage into a drinking water system. Do you believe that there's that the motivation behind providing municipalities funding so that they can properly record and publish this information is a step towards pressuring municipalities to move away from any sewage overflow event in the future? And what does that mean for our asset management planning?
Yeah, so through the chair, good question. I would think this is just my personal take on it, my professional opinion, that the province is doing this. They've recognized. I mean, we have to report to the federal government on these CSO events when they happen, and the bypasses that happen to our receiving body. And we're not alone. Like you'd mentioned, there's 20 that have reached a certain threshold to meet the criteria of the MECP for them to fund these types of programs. But it definitely dovetails into, I think perhaps maybe there's been some, I wouldn't say public outcry, but some public interest with respect to the environment, and perhaps, the residents of our community in the past have not been informed well as the other 19 participating municipalities when these events happen. Like I had said, it's difficult because we know with the changing of climate that we do have, when we do get rain, we're getting the 50-year storms and the 100-year storms more so than we probably ever have. And that's primarily when in a combined sewer system like we have north of the Rideau River, where those instances are higher, where we're 10 to 12 to 13 cycles of that happening in over the course of a year, unfortunately. I would like to think that this all dovetails into, hopefully, some further funding coming down the pipe from the province and the feds. I think it dovetails in with our asset management plan. Not only do municipalities have to contribute, but I would hope and like to think that there's a method to this from the province and the federal government to afford funding down the road if they know what municipalities actually need. And I think that's the big push towards our asset management planning and the regulation around that. We have to do reporting by this July for asset management planning and levels of service. And then there's other milestones in future years to inform what municipalities' infrastructure looks like. Unfortunately, we have a lot of aged infrastructure here in town. We know that, everything north of the Rideau. And I think it's important for this council and future councils to be cognizant of the fact that it's very, very important to, when we're talking about budgets, operating and primarily capital budgets, that we afford the money towards infrastructure revitalization or replacement, because that's the only way to address this is proper sewer separation. We have storm sewers and we have combined sanitary sewers. Sanitary ought to go to the treatment plant. Stormwater ought to be discharged to our, in this case, receiving body being Rideau River. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Madam Chair, but it's a tough one. I don't necessarily have a good, solid answer for it. I'd be somewhat speculating, I guess.
No, that's fine. I think you, in a roundabout way, sort of answered my question. But I will say, I am very thankful to read that all of our CSO events are occurring downstream from our municipal public beach. and our drinking water intake, because I think that's important to note. So this item will proceed to council on March 21st for execution. And Councillor Alfred, I see your hand up.
Thanks, Thanks, Madam Chair. Just before we move on, so these statistics take us up to 2019, but I think we could most probably expect, given what information we have with the rebuild on Beckwith Street alone, we've seen some progress in terms of alleviating the number of these occurrences. Is that fair to say, Paul?
Yeah, through the chair, I would think so. I don't have those numbers in front of me here, Councillor Alfred, but I think that's the idea. You know, Beckwith Street, George Street, and then the streets that come off perpendicular to that, you know, Russell and Main and Chambers. If we can focus on those, I call them kind of principal streets, and then you got your local streets coming off of them. So, and you know, future programs for reconstruction.
So apparently we can look forward to good news. If all that works, we won't be getting the money from the province given to us, because we won't meet the bar, hopefully, in 2021 and 2022.
Right. We'd have a hard time finding, like we have this Old Mill Road CSO, and then our VIA station. Aside from that, we're in pretty good shape at our other pumping stations. So
thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. McMahon, you have your direction. We'll move on to Ms. Costello. Ms. Costello is asking for committee to advance to council a declaration of 14 and 30 Robinson Avenue in Smith Falls as surplus lands for the purpose of sale. Carrie, is there any new information or a summary that you would like to provide?
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, you just summarized my report. The history of this property is outlined in the report. I think council is very aware that this was a property. We've had 2 failed tax sales on it. It has now formally been vested into the town's name. So in order for us to proceed down the land sale process, we first have to have council declare it surplus to our needs. So that is the first step. And with council's concurrence, we would bring forward a resolution to our next meeting of council.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions or comments? Thumbs up? Thumbs up. Thank you, Carrie. You've got your direction.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Crowder with our annual year in review report. Julia, is there any new information or perhaps some particular projects that you would like to highlight tonight?
Thanks, Madam Chair, through you. Really, the report is just to present to council and community the highlights for 2021. Some of the highlights included is the development of the DC background study. So new cultural plan was adopted by council this year. The active transportation plan was created. The 3rd phase of town hall renovations were approved, and as Art said today, have started. Lombard Abbott Street intersection project was completed. A significant amount of grants were secured to offset costs from major municipal projects, which was really exciting. The affordable housing strategy was completed, and a series of development projects were approved through site plan process, which will ultimately contribute to additional housing units. There are many more highlights and achievements located within the document, so we encourage council to take a look. Council will have a hard copy provided to them, so see Nadine when you are at town hall for your hard copy. We're going to be putting this through social media accounts for community, as well as sending it out to our stakeholders.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia. So message to the public, make sure to keep an eye on social media and our website to review the comprehensive report. Councillor Brennan, you've got a question?
No, just a comment. It's a really impressive document. And I guess the question is this, for people that can't access social media or through the internet, is there copies available for the public? And I'll note that your budget there is $1,000, which is really modest for a document such as this. I went through it, and it's impressive indeed. So hopefully people can get a copy if they want one. hard copy?
Absolutely. Through you, Madam Chair, we did print 20 hard copies off, and 7 of those were allocated for council, but there are some hard copies available to the public if they wish. Once those copies are gone, we're happy to print them out to provide them to anyone who does want a hard copy. So the budget, because we've done the annual report with the same consultant over the years, the actual editing and updating of the document, the cost for that is fairly streamlined and low because you're not creating a whole new document every year. And the printing cost was fairly minimal because we decided not to print a large number of prints this year, just because everything is moving forward to digital and seems the community likes to receive information digitally. So absolutely, if someone wants a hard copy, we can definitely provide it to them. This year, we also took the opportunity to streamline the document a little bit. In previous years, it was almost 36 pages, I believe. So we were able to really reduce the numbers and try and take a more visual design approach to highlighting some of that key information. So that also helped with the cost savings.
Thanks for that. I mean, great job. I guess my point is the more copies, the better. I think that's something we should be proud of. And as I said before, not everybody actually it's nice to have something to flip through rather than scroll through. And so hopefully there's a great demand and we have to print more. I'm more happy to support that.
Thank you. Councillor Alfred?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take this opportunity to celebrate all that's been accomplished in 2021, but also to recognize that while council has their hands in a lot of the decisions that make up this annual report, it is the town staff during a pandemic with all the challenges that those posed that have delivered on all of these accomplishments. So I want to take the opportunity, as I know my colleagues would, to recognize what kind of work was done under difficult circumstances at times, and how much progress that that the town has made in large part to the staff of the town of Smith Falls.
Sorry, had to unmute myself. Councillor McKenna, you're next.
Thank you. I agree with both Councillor Brennan and Councillor Alfred. And feel free to give my printed copy to a member of the public. I enjoyed it online. I did have a question, and I guess I was just a little confused. On page 1, I really like those high-level bullets of numbers. It said we spent about 27 million, or 27 million was invested in development. And then on the building permit side, it says there's 21 million in building permits issued. So I just didn't know where the 27 and the 21 million, is there another 5 or 6 million that comes in some other way other than through building permits? I guess I was just trying to understand that.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. Really the 27 million is related to investments in the town, and the building permit revenues or the cost of building, that's the other number that's noted in the building section. So 2 different streams.
Okay, thank you. So if the provinces that just did spent some money on upgrading our monitoring of our water system, we would include that in that, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And a lot of that was offset by all those grants that we received. So the actual cost to the community is much less.
So you just go through the report to find that, though they're in there. Just thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? No? Okay. Julia, do we need to pass a resolution to receive this item, or this is just for information purposes at committee of the whole?
Just for information.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Moving on, Mr. Manhire is up next. We have a recommendation from staff that council approve the identified location of the Redefine Arts and Interval House for the Countdown Public Art Project Mosaic to honor those exposed to gender-based violence. I believe the proposed location by staff is in the town square. Art, is there any new information beyond what's provided in the staff report, or a high-level summary that you would like to provide?
No, just staff did reach out, as council indicated, when they came to council for to present the idea, and this is the recommendation coming from that group.
Thank you. Questions or comments by council? Okay, we'll start with Mayor Pankow, followed by Councillor McKenna, and then Councillor McGuire. Thank you.
Actually, no questions. I went through the report. I think it was a reasonable approach to determine the most appropriate location for this, and I think it is the right location. So I support the recommendation and look forward to this coming into place later this spring.
Thank you. You were too fast for me, Mayor Pankow. I was trying to eat a chicken nugget. Councillor McKenna, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, the process that I know all we did, I know Director Manhire, you're correct. We asked you to go back and ask the group their preference, and they gave it. I'm still, I'm less interested in the town square, and I still remain more interested in something perhaps at the Bascule Bridge in honor of the tragic murder that took place there over 30 years ago. I think it's a quiet place of reflection. People go there to reflect on the sunset. They would go there. And I understand it's complicated because we have to deal with Parks Canada. And I did reach out to Erin Lee this morning. Unfortunately, we weren't able to connect. I just wanted to get a better sense of what her take is, and did she have the full understanding of the importance of the Bascule Bridge site, and what it means to us who were around, and those of us who want to stop violence altogether. So I guess I'm interested in, I'm still not ready to give my support to the town square without a more robust conversation about the Bascule Bridge, and trying once again to get our partners at Parks Canada to come around to work with this municipality to get this done, and other things. I was worried that one of the reasons we didn't want to go there is because they felt it was going to be, it might take quite a bit of work just to deal with Parks Canada. I don't want to be discouraged by them, and I don't want that to be the reason why we didn't consider other options, I guess is my comment.
So, Madam Chair, there was discussion.
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Manhire. Mr. McKenna, did you have a question, or perhaps we'll do the roundtable and then Mr. Manhire, you can provide comments.
Well, the question was, is the reason we're not looking at other sites beside Market Square because Parks Canada is, at least in my term of council, have been
challenging,
bureaucratic, and I understand they've got to think about the whole canal. They can't just focus on Smiths Falls, but I would like to see, I guess my question was, are we stepping away from there because of Parks Canada?
Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, it was a decision of the group, and they did take a look at all three sites that we had presented. And, you know, the issue with Parks Canada has been good. They certainly have their process to work through. You know, it's not insurmountable by any means, but it wasn't a factor in the decision to have it at the town square. I think the group felt that it was a natural gathering place for people, and that you would have a number of different groups that might be encouraged to have that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor McGuire, and then I see Councillor Allen and Councillor Brennan, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I share Councillor McKenna's sentiments about the Bascule Bridge site. I think that as we're preparing to light that site and clean it up and make it more appealing to members of the public, we're really not telling the full story of the site if we had the opportunity to put this mosaic there and we don't take advantage of that opportunity. I'd like to, I don't know what the conversation was like with the partners, but if that vision for that site has been communicated and if there's an opportunity there, I think it would be the best place for it. One thing with the plan for the park that I was disappointed to see was that it doesn't appear to be any consideration for potentially moving the cenotaph. I believe there was direction from council to follow through on those discussions, and unfortunately, it looks like these plans have moved ahead without looking at that. So I'm just wondering, and that comes too, if the cenotaph's moved over, then is it becoming crowded with different memorials? Or so my question is, do we have any context on where those discussions about the cenotaph are at this stage?
Thank you. Mr. Manhire?
I have not had any discussions with that, and CAO Morris might have some more information.
Thank you. CAO Morris, do you have some context for us?
Yeah, so committee will recall when we had the discussion about the gateway features, the cenotaph came up as potentially requiring a relocation if a gateway feature were put on that quadrant of the intersection in front of the library. So our committee may also remember you didn't render a decision on the gateway. So Mr. McMunn is preparing a report to come back to have a discussion so that we can get direction on the gateway feature, the location, the orientation, the theme, and that kind of thing. So we haven't taken measures to relocate the cenotaph because we haven't had direction yet on the gateway feature. So that will be coming forward shortly, and then we can weave all of these things together. But Councillor McGuire raises a very good point. If the direction is to relocate the cenotaph, then we stand to have some congestion in the Town Square Park.
Thank you, CAO Morris. Maybe we'll come back to that point. I'll park it for now. But Councillor Allen and then Councillor Brennan, and I believe Councillor Alford, your hand is up as well. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with my colleagues. I think the Bascal Bridge Park is a better location, and for a number of reasons. One, you know, those of us that are my age and older remember that horrific experience and living through it. And the other thing is it's going to be more available space, because this looks like a significant art piece that's going to be a very beautiful dedication piece. But in the town square, we have 2 butterfly gardens that weren't initially planned for that space. And when Tom Folks gave us the large amount of money to build a bandstand, like the one that he and his wife experienced joy through, he was envisioning a town square where people could gather and, you know, sit on the grass and listen to the band music, or some kind of host person in the bandstand giving a debate or a theater group or whatever. And the butterfly gardens are going to be beautiful, but I just think we've already taken a lot of space. So if we put a very large art space there as well, that park's getting very small, and I can't see it being a great gathering space if there's not any space for people to actually come and sit down and enjoy what's being done there. That's my my point of view. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I want to thank my colleague, Councillor McKenna, for bringing this up. And I didn't make the connection. And actually, I didn't know Carolyn, but I knew Ian. And he was a big part of the Evergreen Avenue Committee. And actually, I think that particular spot is very appropriate. And it's especially since we have plans to make that a spot where people want to go. People already go there to watch sunsets, but we want to make it people friendly. And I think that is a perfect spot for it. And I'm certain that if council expresses a desire and a wish to place this there in conjunction with what we're doing, I have no doubt that Parks Canada will work with us to ensure that happens. But thanks, Peter, for bringing that up. I hadn't thought of it, and I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alfred.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of things. One, I've had it suggested to me that the other location that could be considered for the monument to relocate in is down at the community center. So that was a Legion member. I had asked, we had asked that the Legion be approached to see if there was any objections, and I didn't hear the results of those inquiries, or maybe those inquiries haven't happened. With regard to, and her name was Heather Fraser, and her father worked for Parks Canada, as I did. And it was a horrific murder. And I think it would, I think an art installation of that kind at the town square would add to it. And it certainly, the town has plans for more public art. That would be a very visible location for something of that nature. So I'm not completely opposed to having it in the town square or near, but I think in terms of what we hope to develop in terms of our waterfront and that Bascule Bridge, and to honor Heather's memory, and in terms of Parks Canada, Ian worked for them for a number of years. So I really hope that, but again, if the group is saying they want it in the town square, we should probably pay some attention to that as well. So I am right now, Madam Chair, kind of on the fence.
I see that, Councillor. All right. Well, perhaps to summarize, what I can see from council is that there seems to be a general consensus that perhaps the Bascule Bridge would be a more contextually appropriate site to recognize the purpose of this mosaic. But there is, of course, an acknowledgement that this mosaic is not, necessarily a project of the town of Smiths Falls, but rather a collaboration with some of our agency partners. So perhaps what we can do is provide staff direction to go back to our agency partners, in particular, and I want to get it right, Interval House, but the Redefine Art and Interval House for the Countdown Public Art Project Mosaic specifically, and get comments in writing that perhaps could accompany the next staff report as to their preferred location, acknowledging that the dominant wish of council is to locate it at the Bascule Bridge. All right. Mr. Manhire, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one of the part of the conversation that we had with the group is that this is not necessarily dedicated as a memorial site. This is a site that is designed to encourage discussion and debate and as a healing piece. So it's not necessarily a memorial site about an incident. It's about an issue in community that needs to be discussed and needs to be front and center, which is, I believe, why they were looking at the most traffic to be able to do that.
Thank you. I think we can all appreciate that, and certainly that's perhaps something that we can reconsider when this item comes back to us. But I think CAO Morris also made an excellent point about having some context for decision making around whether or not we're locating the cenotaph to this site as well. And Councillor Allen also referenced the fact that there's a lot of elements going into this park at this point, and perhaps there needs to be some more context about how all of these elements are going to integrate in this space. So unless I hear further comment from council, I would suggest that we invite Mr. Manhire to come back perhaps at the end of this month with written comments from our collaborator regarding Bascale Bridge in particular. And notwithstanding that, perhaps CAO Morris can provide some additional context for consideration around the cenotaph. Mr. McGuire?
Oh, sorry, I cut out there a bit. I'm good with that. Thanks, Nikki.
Okay, thank you. I thought there was a question in there, Chris. Councillor McKenna.
No, excellent summary, Madam Chair. I just wonder if we could have at least a preliminary discussion with Parks Canada in that report as well, just to, if it's a non-starter from their point of view, then it is. So we wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. But if the window's open, and as Councillor Alford said, there's a family relationship to Parks, there's so much meaning to that site, that's all. But if Parks said it's just not going to happen, well, I'd be disappointed, but that it might move us on to some other site.
No, thank you, Councillor. I think that's an excellent point, and will help provide the needed context that's perhaps missing from the discussion at this point. So Mr. Manhire, I think you have your direction, unless there's clarity you need, but if not, then we'll see you at the end of the month. All right, moving on, councillors. Nadine is up next, and Nadine is going to talk to us about lame duck periods, which means we are getting very close to an election. Nadine, any election 101 you would like to provide for the benefit of the public?
Well, just to, we're here tonight just to seek directive from council and to update council on the lame duck period in relation to the 2022 municipal election. With that, lame duck is a term that council is referred to when it is determined that the new council will have less than 75% of the membership of the former council. The determination of whether a municipal council is in a restricted position is pursuant to section 275 of the Municipal Act. And this restricted time, again, is also known as lame duck, and it occurs twice during the municipal election process. So just for the public, I know council's read the report, there's two periods. The first period is from August 19th, which is nomination day, to October 24th, which is election day. The second period is from October 24th, election day, to November 14th, which is the last day of the current term of council. There are restrictions when a council is in a lame duck position. The council shall not take on any of the following actions, which is the appointment or removal from office of any officer of the municipality, the hiring or dismissal of any employee of the municipality, the disposition of any real or personal property of the municipality which has a value exceeding $50,000 at the time of disposal, and making any expenditures or incurring any other liabilities which exceeds $50,000. The report is on our website, and it details, provides a bit more details with respecting to each of those items. What council can do is they can bring forward a bylaw to delegate authority to the CAO, and that would provide the authority of the municipality to be delegated to a person or body prior to nomination day for the election of the new council. So again, tonight we're just seeking council direction on that to update you on the restricted acts, and seeking direction that the municipal clerk can be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw prior to nomination day.
Thanks, Dad. Super exciting. Thumbs up all around. I assume this is pretty standard for municipal councillors. Nads, this isn't necessarily going to come forward at the next meeting, just sometime before August 19th.
Right. So we just, we could, we just need to, it is good to have it in place, and then depending on what happens, it's already there, right? So that the delegated authority can happen if we need it.
Perfect. Thanks, Nads. Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I just want to, absolutely, we've done this, three of us done this 3 times before. The difference this time is the last day of the term is now November 15th rather than December 1st, which is good. It's not as long of a period where you have to be in this sort of lame duck position. So I'm glad that it's sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you. I support the plan. I just want to clarify the restrictions, the hiring or dismissal of any employee of the municipality. That is if council stuck its nose in that business, which we never would do because that's the CAO's job. But this doesn't restrict the CAO. God forbid if he had to take that kind of action. He's still in charge of the operations. It's just if council tried to get involved with that, which we never would anyways. But
with the exception of the CAO, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Nadine, do you have comments that you want to add for that for context? Otherwise, I think CAO Morris has a comment.
Certainly that is the CAO or the clerk, some of the officers, as it's noted, that are appointed by council. So that's what it relates to, but CAO Morris might want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, so through the chair, Nadine just answered or made the comment I wanted to make that certain officer positions like the clerk, building official, fire chief are appointed by council. So staff would hire them, but council formally appoints them. So that's what's meant by officers of the corporation. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Councillor Alfred, did you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Just so often, Councillor Brennan refers to the fact that three, Councillor Allen, Mayor Panko, and he have gone through. I just want to keep reminding him that I've been on council before too.
Okay, thank you. I feel like we've lost our efficiency at the end of this meeting, councillors. Let's keep going. We're almost there. We've got 2 more staff reports left, both with Senior Planner Grenke. Carl, your first one on the agenda tonight is a recommendation for council to proceed with the execution of a site plan control agreement for the property known as 17 through 23 Beckwith Street North for an infill and intensification development. Do you want to provide a very, very high level overview of the proposal or a summary of any new information that is not already provided in the staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just further to the report, I'd like to highlight 3 particular aspects of the site plan and some information that we have received from the architect over the last little while. Firstly, the building massing. So this project has evolved somewhat since it was originally presented. The first iteration of the concept had all 6 units occupying a second story that covered the entire floor space of the building, thus creating a more traditional looking second story facade. The structural assessment of the proposed addition from the developer's engineer indicated that the resulting snow loading on the neighboring property would require the roof of that adjacent building to be reinforced. As this was not an option for the developer, the only path forward was to pull the building back from the property. So which has resulted in the somewhat unusual massing where we have the second story occupying about 2/3 of the frontage of the building. However, with that, staff have worked with the developer to include second story planters and terraces to help fill in that part of the facade and create a bit more animation. Another thing that warranted particular attention here was the facade. As indicated in the report, the changes to the first story are largely limited to replacing the existing signage with new signboards that will be externally illuminated with shrubs planted and planters at the street level. While the PAC did originally suggest extending brick to the upper levels, that was not carried forward by the applicant in the final plan. The applicant's architect advised that the masonry above the expansive windows was not structurally an option in this case, and their intent was to find low maintenance materials that were complementary to the recommended downtown color palette. The architect advised, in his words, that the corrugated charcoal colored steel provides a unified surface with gentle texture that was quite complementary to the heritage stone masonry as such on the building to the north. And the architect noticed that the color is established in the area and that the wood grain metal siding is also what's wood look-alike but with lower maintenance. The streetscape appearance from William also warranted consideration by staff and the Planning Advisory Committee. While the removal of the former Abbas Electrical building created some additional flexibility for parking, it also created something of a break in the streetscape, and we wanted to thoughtfully consider how that space would be planned. The developer has indicated that he'd like to to develop a smaller building in the near future at this location. However, no concept has been prepared at this time. And staff and the committee are keen to ensure that the site does not remain gravel if it's not going to be developed in the near future. As such, the developer has agreed in principle to provide securities for additional landscaping if the building permit is not obtained within 12 months, and this will be accommodated in the agreement. So to summarize, this was a somewhat unique development in our experience, as it's in addition to an existing building within an already densely developed area. However, we do note the provision of additional rental units along our main downtown street enhances the vitality of the core and existing businesses. If the committee is in agreement to approve the site plan application, we will prepare a bylaw authorizing its execution for council's consideration at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Questions and comments from council. Councillor McGuire, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks a lot, Senior Planner Granke. This is a building much in need of a facelift, and it's exciting to see density and residential units being added to the downtown with high quality housing, as they call it. I really like the signboards and the lighting, and it ties in nicely with the existing first level. My question is on the corrugated steel on the second and third floor. Carl, I'm not sure from looking at the front elevation, but is the gray corrugated steel on the third floor, is that in line with the darker below, or is that set back from the street further?
Carl, to you.
Yes, my reading of the site plan is that it's in line with the second story facade. It's just a visual indication that it is set back further.
Okay, so it's just above the parapet kind of thing. I guess my concern is that we don't have corrugated steel in our downtown core like this, and where it's been used in signs and the like, it clearly doesn't fit. I'd agree that it's low maintenance, but I don't agree that it comes in well with the stone next door. So I would suggest that we give this back to staff for another week or two to go back to the developer and suggest that they use a stone finish or some other kind of high quality treatment at the very minimum on the black corrugated steel sections at the front that face Becker Street. That would tie it in very nicely to the building on the left. And I think the full wood aluminum will look really good and tie it in with the building on the right. But I really don't like the precedent that we're setting by beginning this design in our downtown. I know the shipping container housing thing is hip right now, but I don't think it belongs in our downtown, and that's what this appears like to me. So that's my take. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Chris. We'll park the idea about revisions to the side. Councillor Brennan, you're next.
Yeah, I support staff's recommendation, and this went through, as Councillor Alford will attest, this went through planning committee, and actually the developer worked with the town, especially on the demolition of the Abbas building and the egress accessing the back of the building. So yeah, I think it's as Councillor Maguire said, it's long needed renovation. It's infill and downtown. There's more housing downtown, so I support the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments from Council? Councillor Allen.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a good residential area, a good residential extra housing and apartments, I guess it's going to be. But I agree with what Councillor McGuire said. I like everything but that gray. I would prefer that it go back and be changed as well.
Okay, thanks. So we have two councillors voting to send this back for staff to do a little bit more work with the developer before it comes back to council. I'm just going to call for a straw vote on that unless there's further comments. Councillor McKenna, do you have a comment before we straw vote? And Mayor Pankow?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. If is it as simple as Councillor Maguire says, is just to ask Mr. Grenke to go back and ask the developer, would they be open to a different option there? And if it was as simple as that, and it could be expedited, because I'd like to see this come forward fairly quickly. If that's all there is to it, then I don't have any issue with that. If it becomes involved and engaged and drawn out, then I would not want to see that. So my question is that as simple as it sounds?
Thank you, Councillor. Carl, do you think it's reasonable to have a conversation with the developer within the next week and perhaps just send council an update via email? And if you're successful or not, perhaps we can proceed to council next week, and you can verbally provide an update at that meeting as well for the public's benefit, at which time we can make a decision to either pull it off the agenda or vote it forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, I can certainly do that. I think if I were to reach out to the proponent, I would look for council's direction on what your on what council's preferred treatment would be, or would we just simply leave this as replace the corrugated steel with something else? The architect had noted that there was that due to the extent of the windows on the bottom, it would be problematic to put too much weight structurally above that. But that's so I would expect that the feedback may not be. It's likely not something that they would be inclined to do easily, but I can certainly ask that question. I can certainly provide council and the public with feedback and the response, but I'll look for council's direction on whether it is brick or stone or some other sort of finishing that you would like us to explore on those upper levels.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Mayor Pankow, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, and as much as I'm thrilled to see the increase in density and the additional residential units downtown, two elements, I guess. One, yeah, I'm not thrilled with the facade enhancements and the features. And so I wouldn't mind having the developer take another look at this and see what could be done to make it, I would say I would suggest more consistent with the building to the north. My other concern is this, I would think this would be an ideal opportunity to bring in accessibility improvements. And considering, I mean, we're not at 2025 and we expect this to be in place unless the province changes course. This building is very difficult for someone to access. It has physical mobility limitations. It's still going to be a commercial main floor, and if it's going to be done, that would be the time to do it. And I can't imagine how it would be done. How much more difficult it would be to do it down the road. So that's something else I would like to see. And when we're seeing developments, especially in our downtown, I think accessibility must have serious consideration and enhancements.
Thanks, Mayor Pankow. Carl, before I go back to Councillor Maguire, can you just advise whether or not there were any universal design considerations that have been included in the proposal? The site plan's a little pixelated, so it's hard to see.
Yeah, there have been, and this is something that we did engage on, and there are no enhancements to the exterior to accommodate accessibility that are proposed through this site plan.
So, sorry, just to be clear, this is something that you've already asked the developer for, and they have not been provided as part of the staff request. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor Maguire, we'll come back to you, and then maybe we'll do another straw vote to either send this back for further discussion with the developer or proceed next Monday. Councillor Maguire, what were your follow-up questions?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I fully support the Mayor's comments on accessibility, and I'd be open to, I'd love to see an agreement like we signed with the Rita Hotel, where if they need to use a bit of sidewalk to create that accessibility, looking into that option. If space was a constraint that limited it the first time this came up, we've got these nice wide sidewalks, so let's make use of them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alfred, and then I'm going to call the vote, please and thank you.
Yes, the Planning Advisory Committee went through the accessibility challenges, and I don't have any objection to Mr. Granke going back and seeing if there's another alternative that would be more acceptable. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that I don't think we have any mechanism by which to legislate that. So it depends on the goodwill of the developer, if I'm not mistaken. And with regard to accessibility, all Sean's points were made at Planning Advisory, and they were not taken up by the developer. So I don't know that we're going to get any other place with that. Anyway, I don't mind. I can support going back and asking them again about the corrugated steel, but if they come back and say that's a no too, what avenues do we have left?
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I'm going to provide 2 cents. I think, Carl, what you need is firm direction from council to provide you with the hammer you need to take this back to the developer and request pensive and meaningful redesign to provide us with something that complements our downtown and provides the accessible infrastructure that is so deserved, and rightly so, for a building that is accessible to the public. So I think from what I'm hearing from council, you have that. I'll ask for a straw vote, but I think regardless of what the legislative policy around design guidelines we have right now and the minimal official plan language we have around accessibility, I think it would be short-sighted of us to advance this design without requiring those things as part of the resubmission. So with that, I will call a straw vote for council to direct staff to send this back to the developer to discuss facade treatment and accessibility. Those have been the 2 points that have come up to date. And then this can come back to council for further direction and discussion. So all in favor?
Did Councillor McKenna have a comment before we vote?
Sorry, I called the straw vote. I was hoping to advance this, and then if there's other comments, we can come back to the comments. So I will call the straw vote. Those in favor of sending this back to the developer for further discussion? Thank you. So that goes back. Carl, are there any further points that you have that require clarity from council before you go back to the proponent?
So I'll thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll look for council. Are there is there a preferred approach or preferred material you'd like to see for the facade? Is council's intent to focus on replacing or altering the corrugated steel facade exclusively, or would council like to see the wood grain siding replaced as well?
I believe the components that council has discussed tonight have been pretty limited to the corrugated steel, unless I see hands otherwise to that point. But I think it's the corrugated steel in particular that is questionable. Okay, Councillor McKenna, you did have further comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm all for efficiency, but we do need this is a pretty important discussion. I would have preferred to make the comment before we did the straw vote. Having said that, I just want to make sure that we're being consistent with every other application we're getting on commercial to around the accessibility issue. I don't remember us, we've encouraged it at the Rideau Hotel, we talked about it, but I don't want to pick on this one particular developer. Many of our stores are not, and our commercials are not accessible. And so I just want to make sure that are we setting, what are we saying, and do we have So every development now in a commercial space, we're going to send it back until they make it accessible. I thought the responsibility was the owners and the developers. So I'm just a little unclear about our authority at this point to dictate that.
Thank you. And perhaps Carl can correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly in the case of the Rideau Hotel, that storefront does have accessible entrances. That was something that is done. And thinking back to our more recent site plan approval for the Hammer and Nails development at Maple Street, I believe the commercial there was also designed to be accessible. So our practice, at least during this term of council, has been to have accessible components incorporated into those designs so that all residents of Smiths Falls can use those spaces. Carl, am I mistaken in the Hammer and Nails development?
I would need to review that site plan. I don't recall offhand as far as the ground floor commercial. I know it was it is on those entrances are at grade or close to grade, so it would be very. So I believe so. I know we worked on accessibility with the proponents for the upper story residential. Another thing that we've often looked at through the community improvement plan is we've used that as a carrot to encourage accessibility and enhancements as well. Unfortunately, we don't have adequate. We have about $1,300 at this point in the CIP reserve for this year, which won't go far as providing an incentive. As far as Hotel Rideau, you're absolutely correct, Councillor. We do have an accessibility ramp around the corner of that building, and they're fortunate in that sense that they have a side yard to work with. But I can certainly confirm that it is something that is normally sought by staff and certainly supported by the planning committee and the CIP committee. And in this case, the developer did. The architect did provide a brief rationale as to why it wasn't presented, but with council's direction, I can certainly advise them that this is something that the council would like them to have a closer look at.
Thank you, Carl. Any other comments or questions on this item before we move on to our next planning item? Seeing none. Okay, Carl, your next item on tonight's agenda is a rezoning rather than site plan. For 169 Chambers Street. It's an amendment to redesignate the property from local commercial C2 to residential type 4 special exception. The special exception to read as follows: to permit a multiple dwelling house with 3 units and an additional residential unit in a detached auxiliary structure within an existing structure on the site as of the date of passing of this bylaw. Carl, is there any new information or a summary that you would like to provide?
Sure, I will keep this. I'll keep this brief. This application is for a former local commercial site at 169 Chambers on the road out of town in the East End. The official plan designates the site as residential, which accommodates a variety of forms and types of commercial uses that are compatible in density, form, and context of their neighborhood. And in this case, we are looking at a medium density residential development, which is supported on collector roads. So broadly speaking, the adaptive reuse of a commercial structure that appears not to have been needed for many years to accommodate rental housing is supported in policy. The Planning Advisory Committee hosted a public meeting for the application, and feedback centered on concerns with respect to safety and access, especially around the intersection of Empress and Chambers. And some suggestions were made by the abutting property owner that would be accommodated through a site plan application. And if the zoning is approved, then planning staff will work with the proponents and the Public Works Department to fine tune that. So based on our assessment of the information provided, we've come to the opinion the proposal is consistent with the official plan and guiding policy documents, and as such, staff recommend approval of this application. And if supported by committee of the whole, we can bring forward a bylaw for consideration at the next meeting. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Carl. Any other questions or comments? Wendy, do you have a question or comment or just a thumbs up? Just a thumbs up. All right, perfect, Carl. That one's easy for you tonight. We'll bring that forward at the next meeting. Thanks for your patience while we debated your last item. Nadine, you're back up with our very last item on tonight's agenda. This was our additional item to be added to the agenda. I think we're calling it 8.11 as a committee appointment. Can you provide a summary of who and what we are appointing?
Yes, staff are seeking tonight permission from council to bring forward a resolution to appoint Christopher Cummings to the library board. This received full support from the library board, and the recommendation is for council's consideration.
Thank you, Nadine. Thumbs up, comments, questions? Lovely. Thank you, council. Congratulations, former councillor Cummings, on rejoining the library board. With that, I don't believe there are any other items. So I will call for a motion to adjourn proceedings at 6:43, moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor McKenna. All those in favor? So long, friends. Stay safe. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.